Welcome to this video where I'll give you a quick overview of Android Studio. And as at this stage, I'm at version 2.2.3. Version 2.3 is not yet stable, so we'll be working with Android Studio 2.2.3. So on this screen, after you've installed the Java Development Kit, the JDK, as well as Android Studio, and get your SDK up to date, when you start Android Studio, you should be able to see this very first screen. So if you start up Android Studio, you'll get to the screen. On the left hand side of the screen, you'll see there's a list of all the applications that you've opened recently. So this could be any new applications that you've created, or applications that you've opened, or whatever the case may be. So this will be your recent applications that you had opened. Then you can start a new Android Studio project. You can open an existing one and so forth. You can also import from Eclipse, ADT, and import some Android code. But for now, we're just going to start a new Android Studio project. So for the most part, you're probably going to use start a new Android Studio project or open an existing Android Studio project. So we're going to say start a new Android Studio project. So you can click on that now. So if you create a new Android Studio project, just try and get my screen in view, you'll see that you need to configure a new project. So you'll have an application name, which could be anything. So I'm just going to call this first application. So you can call your application name anything you want, and that should be a descriptive type of application name. So if you're creating a contacts app, you can say name it just contacts or whatever. Then for the second part, this is your company domain. So let's say you've got a company already and you've got your website. Then this is a way to actually uniquely identify your app. So if you've got a web address like, let's say, curious.co.za, so you'll type in your company domain, your website there. And what this does then, it creates your package name, which should be unique for every application in the App Store. So it's just a way to make sure that your application is unique in the Google Play Store. So you can see it takes it from the back, za.co.curious.firstapplication, which is basically the name of your application, all lowercase. So that's very important. You can decide right from the start what should your company domain be, which will then become part of your package name. Then you'll see you've also got a project location. So my project is on the desktop and I've got Android projects there, a folder. Just note that the folder should not contain spaces, otherwise Android Studio could get some problems. So I'm using Android_projects for my folder, and then the app name is going to be first application. So obviously you are able to go through to the three dots there to change your location. Okay, so for now, I'm just going to say next. So after setting everything you wanted there, you can just say next. And now on the next screen, we've got a few options to choose from. We can choose to develop for phone and tablet. We can choose to develop for Wear, for TV, for Android Auto, which is the cars, and then for glass. So it's up to you what you want to develop for. So now if you go to phone and tablet, which is the one that we're mostly going to use, and that's the minimum SDK that you need to choose now. So this is the version of Android. You remember the video that I did with all the versions. So there you can see Android 3.0. 3 is the honeycomb, and then I for ice cream sandwich in the I's, then the J's, then the K's, and so it carries on until we go to the newest nougat one. Okay, so you can see now if I choose the newest one there, let's take this one, 25. You can see that I can only run this app on less than 1% of the devices that's currently on the Google Play Store. So if I create an app, I know that less than 1% of all devices will be able to run this app, which is not a good thing at this stage. So for now, we're going to go down to, let's say, as default, a 4.0.3. And you can see that this one will run approximately on 98.3 of all the devices that are active on the Google Play Store. Okay, so you see my stats load failed, so it could be inaccurate, but it's basically 98.3% of all the devices, which is a quite good number there. Okay, so then we can go to next. And then if you get to this screen, you need to add an activity to mobile. Now, an activity is basically just a screen for the user. Whatever the user will see on the screen, that we call an activity. So you can see we can add no activity or a basic activity with just a little button, or an empty activity, which we're going to use for the most part. And then a full screen activity, there's add mobs, there's a scrolling activity, there's a navigation drawer activity, there's a maps activity, and so forth. So there's a lot of things that we can do and select right from the start. But I'm going to select an empty activity. We will start right from the start. Then if we customize the activity, you can see that we have an activity name and we've got a layout file. So how this works is we've got a Java file that's basically the meat of your activity. That's the coding behind the scenes, what happens on that specific screen. And then obviously we've got the layout file, what the user sees. So there's two files that works together. It's the main activity and then the activity main for your very first one. Obviously, you can go and change your main activity to anything you want. Let's say you don't want to call it main activity, but you want to have it start activity, then you are more than welcome to do so. You can just change that to start activity. But for the most part, every Android application starts at a main activity. So I usually just leave this one as it is, as a main activity. And then you can see the layout name goes with activity_main. You could also say main_activity. It just should be something descriptive about, or just something to correlate the two. This is main activity, this is activity main. So I can see this Java file goes with this layout. So if you want, you can just go and say main_activity. And then leave that one as main activity. So then the two are basically the same name. The layout names must unfortunately be only lowercase and no spaces, so you can use the underscore. And then you can see also backwards compatibility is clicked there, which means that this app will also work for all the other devices lower than 4.0.3. Okay, so if you're done with that, you can just click on finish. And now it will start opening up Android Studio. If you've got some proxy settings you want to fill out, if you're behind a proxy, you can do that now and just fill in your proxy settings. And now it basically just loads your whole project. And as soon as it's done, we will come back to the video. Okay, so Android Studio is done loading my very first application. So you can see there's the name of the application. And then if you got to the screen with nothing open, you just need to go and click on project there, which will give you your whole project. So you'll see basically we've got two folders there. We've got an app folder with manifest Java and the resources folder, or the rest folder, and we've got Gradle scripts. So the Gradle scripts, or the Gradle, is just essentially an open source build tool to build your app. You can load custom scripts in order to build your app as you like, but we'll get to that later on. So there's three folders under the app folder which we need to have a look at. So the first one is the Android manifest file. So if you open up the Android manifest, this Android manifest file is basically a file that contains some basic details about your app, such as you can look at the icon there, such as the label for your app, the theme, and so forth. But we'll be adding content to this file later on and changing it later on. So don't worry too much about this now. So let's just close it down. But this is a very important file that we need to have a look at. But we'll have a look at that while we go through other videos. Then the second folder there is the Java folder. In the Java folder, you see there's three folders. There's two with basically test folders, and there's the one that we're going to mainly focus on, which is the one without anything in brackets. So you can see there's your main activity file. So if you double click your main activity file, this is all your Java files will be under your domain, or your package, which is za.co.urias.firstapplication, exactly as we defined it when we started this project. So if you go to the main activity, you can basically just see at the top, there's the package again. This is the unique package in the Google Play Store. Well, should be unique. And then if you go to the import statements, you can see there's a few import statements that we need, and which we will also add to these import statements. One, for example, is the app compat activity that allows this application of ours to be backward compatible. Okay, and then you can see we define a class with the name main activity. It extends the app compat activity, which means it is compatible backwards. And then we've got some stuff going on inside of the main activity. So we'll get back to the main activity. For now, just know that we need a main activity where our app will start. And then with that, if you, I'm just going to, let us just leave it like this. If we go to the resource folder, you will see there's drawable, there's layout, there's map, there's values, and we can add some other folders also later on. We will add some other folders. So here is in the resources folders where we will save all our pictures and our layout files. Map is also pictures and some language specific files and so forth. So this is all the resources for our application. It will be saved here. So if you design a custom button, for example, it will probably be saved under drawable or under layout. So it depends on what you need to do, on in which folder you need to go and save this. But as we go through the videos and actually doing that, we'll show you how to go through it. Okay, so in the resources folder then, a very important one for now is the layout folder. So you remember when we created this application right at the start, we said that the main activity goes along with main activity with all lowercase. So this is the layout file and that is the Java file. So very important that these two is connected. So you'll see in the main activity Java file, we'll get to that later on, but you can see it gets connected to main activity. Main activity, which is a reference to this one. So when this Java file gets loaded, it automatically loads the layout file, and that's the one that the user sees. So if I double click on main activity then, just going to open up, make this a bit bigger. You can see there's some zoom controls. I'm just going to zoom in this a bit. If you've got, let's say, two things there, you can see at the top, there's, if I just hover over that, it just gives me the design. That's just the blueprint, and then that's the design and the blueprint. But we'll get to that later on. So just get to the design. You can zoom in a bit, and you can see that this is basically how the screen will look like. This is your very first application, your very first screen of your app, and this is how it will look. So you can see there that we've got the action bar at the top with the time, the battery indicator, Wi-Fi signal, whatever. Obviously, it depends on phone. It depends on the specific phone that you're using. So in this case, just a simple preview of it. Okay, then the action bar, then we've got something on the screen. In this case, we only have a few text there. So we're going to have hello world there as text. If I click now on my delete button, it will be deleted. It's how easy it is to actually change anything on your screen. Okay, so you can see there at the bottom also you see your three buttons there, the back button, the home button, and then to see all your apps button. It's just the look of possibly how your screen could look. Okay, so if you go to the top again, you can see that you can change your orientation of what you see in front of you. So currently it's portrait. So if I change it back to from portrait to landscape or whatever, you can see the change directly in the middle screen. Okay, so now I can see how it will look in the landscape mode. So if you go back to portrait again, you can zoom back in again. Then another thing that you can do is also change your phones. So currently we are working with the Nexus 4, which is running API 19. That's the preview that we've got here. But let's say we want to have programming on an Android TV and we want to see how that would look on the Android TV. So there's the layout then for the TV. So you can move between devices to see how it will display on different devices. Then you can also go through different API versions. That's basically just the Android versions. If you want to go to a lower phone, API 15, see how your app will perform on that, or whatever you want to do. Then there's some themes that you can change. So you can go and play around changing some different themes for your app. There's also a language part where you can edit all your specific translations for your app. You can have different languages for your app, so it depends on the language that's set currently on the user's phone. That language will display on the phone if you support all the languages. Okay, and then there's a lot of other settings like the zoom controls that you can also have a look at. So go and play around a bit with Android Studio and make sure you know what all of these different functions do. Okay, then if we go to the left-hand side, you'll see there's a palette there. So there we get widgets, like for example, the text view. So the first one that we've got here is a text view. You can see there it's a text view. So if I want a new text view, I will just drag the text view to the screen. I can also include buttons, toggle buttons, checkboxes, radio buttons, spinners, which is the old combo box. There's progress bars, there's rating bars, and so forth. If we get to the text fields, this is where we want the user to add some text so that we can get input from the user. We'll use text fields like plain text. There's password text that uses dots instead of text. There's email, there's phone. Phone will make sure that if you type something, it can only be a phone number, for instance. For numbers as well, you can make sure that whatever the user types, it only types numbers. And if you choose one of these numbers, also only the number keypad will pop up on the screen and not the whole keyboard, which is a lot more user-friendly. So have a look at all of these. We'll look at that later on, but these are the text fields that we can use to get input from the user. Then there's also different layouts. So you can see there's a constraint layout, which is something totally new. There's a grid layout, there's a frame layout, there's linear layouts, there's a relative layout, the one that we currently have. There's a table layout, rows, there's fragments. Then you can also see there's containers like a list view. You can show a list of items for your users. There's grid views, there's scroll views, there's tabs, there's websites that you can place inside of your app, and so forth. Then on the images and media section, you can add an image button, an image view just to display a specific picture. You can also use or display a video. Then on date and time, you can also have a date picker. There's a calendar view, there's text clock, and so forth. And then there's also a lot of other advanced features that we're possibly not going to have a look at in the videos, but there's a lot of stuff that you can do right from the palette by just dragging in and dropping it on the screen. Then on the right hand side of your screen, you'll see that we've got some properties there. So if I click on my Hello World text view there, you can see that I can add an ID for it. I can look at the width and the height of it. I can set the text and the appearance of the text, and so forth. So for every component that you place on the screen from the palette, for example, if I drag in a button, I will have different properties. So for every property or for every item widget that you take from the left hand side and place on the screen, you will have different properties to be able to set to that specific item. Okay, so we'll get to that per item as we get to it later on in the videos. Then another important part of Android Studio here is your component tree. So the component tree basically gives you a good oversight or overview of what is happening on your screen right at the moment. So you can see the base view basically, or the base part in the component tree is the phone itself. Then in the phone, in the screen itself, we've got a relative layout. And inside of the relative layout, we've got a text view and a button. And you can see if I click on the button is relative to the side and also relative to the text view at the top, where the text view is relative to the side and to the top. Okay, so this is just a relative layout where every component is relative to something else. But we'll get to a few layouts later on. And then the last part for this video, let's have a look at how can we run this app now. So if you go to Run App, just click on the play button right at the top. You will see, you probably will not have any devices there if you're new with Android and Android Studio. But if you don't have any connected devices, that's all right. We're going to create one now. So you're going to click on Create New Virtual Device. And you can see it says select the hardware for Android Studio for your specific device. So you can go and create a new Nexus phone or whatever phone you would like there. Let's just say we're going to say taking the Nexus 6 there. So choose the phone that you want to have a look at. Go to Next. You can see there that at this stage I only have this one image installed. It's always important to go with one that says with Google APIs at the back. And your devices here will depend on how up to date your SDK is. In my SDK, I do not update each and every system image, which means I don't have all the images here. So just choose one there, one of the images, and then you can basically just go to Next at the bottom. You can give your AVD a specific name. You can change the resolution. You can look at if you have all the other versions also available. You can run another version of Android on it. You can set the orientation to portrait or landscape right when it starts. There's some graphic options that you can set and so forth. So you can just go to finish. Okay, so when your device is then finished, you can see it gets listed there. I already had the Nexus 6 there, so it just created the Nexus 6 II there. So then you can choose that device, just say OK, and you will see that Android Studio will start basically setting up that device for you. Now at the bottom, while it's running, you'll see that we've got a log that tells us exactly what's going on. And this is also a nice part where we can go and have a look at errors. If your app is crashing, you can come back to the log at the bottom and see what happened. What was the exception that caused it? What was the specific line of code that caused it? So everything will happen down in this section. Okay, so you can see it's now launching the application, trying to launch the app. But at this stage, our virtual device is not yet running. So we'll just wait for it to come online. Okay, so there's my virtual device up and running. So you can see that if I look at my preview of what we should have for our application, then this one running on the virtual phone actually looks the same. So that's a good indication of how your application will display on the phone. So on the right hand side, you can see there's a power button, there's some volume controls. You can switch the orientation of your phone. You can also use a camera. If you've got a webcam, you can connect it to the virtual device. There's zoom controls, and there's the 3 hardware buttons and some others that you can also set location and stuff like that. So you can go and play around with it. If, for instance, I click the back button, it will take me back to the previous screen. If I click the home button, it takes me home. If I click the all apps button, I'll see all the apps currently running, and I can just swipe them away to remove them. So if I go to apps again and run my first application, you can see I've got my application again. So this video was then just a quick overview of Android Studio, and also just to show you how to set up your virtual device and run your very first application.